All right. Welcome to the live book launch for The Master Leader by Mark Moore with significant contributions by Jeff Osborne. Welcome to the live stream, guys. Introduce yourselves.
My name is Mark Moore, and this is Jeff Osborne. I'll let him introduce himself. I was, for half of my career, a college professor at Ozark Christian College, so the Bible nerd guy. And then since 2012, have joined this great church where Jeff and I are working together, Christ Church of the Valley in Phoenix, America.
Phoenix, America. I love that. And I have been in the leadership marketplace for 30 plus years. I joined Christ Church of the Valley 4 years ago, and it's been a great journey. I look at my time in the marketplace as time in Pharaoh's court, where God was teaching me leadership to prepare me for such a time as this.
Now, you say you joined here 4 years ago, but that was just kind of on staff. You've been an elder.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't want to oversell, Jeff, but to be an elder at a church at this level, that's remarkable.
Yeah. 20 years I've been coming to CCV, and it's been great to watch the journey and watch our own leadership experience that we've had here at CCV, let alone anywhere else. I think we could write a whole nother book on how a church grows and how you manage that, and super excited about that.
Well, for those watching, we are celebrating launch day, which is today, October 8th. And as such, we wanted to give everyone who watches this, either live or in the days that follow, 40% off the book.
What?
Yeah, 40% off.
Say that again.
You heard me, Mark.
I don't think we got 40% off.
So if you go to himpublications.com/leader, it'll take you to the checkout page, and then use the code LAUNCH when you go to checkout. And you can buy as many copies as you want. Buy them for your team. Just trust us. You can go ahead and buy them for your team. And so what we're going to do tonight is I've got questions prepared, but this is a live event. So go ahead and ask your questions in comments, and we will ask the authors your questions, and they'll answer them live here. So let's go ahead and jump in. You guys ready?
Ready to roll.
All right. So I think a big question is, how did you move, Mark, from the book idea that you had to working with Jeff to write this?
Yeah, well, actually, there was a pre-book, and that's how Chad got a hold of it. Is I was asked to speak at a leadership conference. There's a couple hundred pastors there. By the time I got done with my notes, they were 80 pages long. And so I just went to a previous publisher and said, would you be interested in making a book out of this? I'll be honest with you. Don't tell anybody this. The original version was not that good. And so Chad picked up the copyright after it went out of print, and Chad called me and said, hey, I want to publish this Master Leader book. And I said, no, it's not worth publishing. But if you give me a chance to tweak it, and really do the investment of making it a readable and usable work. So what I did, basically three things. Number one, I added some practical exercises at the end of every chapter. Number two, I wrote an introduction that was like tapped into the real world and just kind of draws you into the topic. But most importantly, I took all the concepts and I put them on my whiteboard. But to understand why this book came out the way it did, Christ Church of the Valley, it is a church, no question. But we're also an organization. We've got an HR department, and we got a marketing department, and we got staff and hierarchy. This is a whole world that I don't understand, but Jeff does. Because I mean, that's where you lived in Faber's Court, right?
Yep.
So I had this all on the whiteboard, and I wanted to make sure that the words I was using and how I was using them was in the vernacular of a secular leader who's a Christian but working in the marketplace. So Jeff comes in my office, he looks at it, he goes, well, if I were you, I would move this here. And if I were you, I would write it this way. And if I were you, and I'm going, why don't you be me, or at least help me? And so I was stunned, actually, when I asked him. I said, listen, would you be willing to write a piece of every single chapter so that they get a biblical view, like my strength is in biblical theology, Would you be willing to write a piece of it so that it comes straight out of the business world? I was delighted when you said yes. So that's when you came on board.
Yeah, I was
What,
excited.
what would you add to that?
Well, I don't want to tell him what I really thought when I looked at your board at first. I was like,
No,
oh my,
go ahead and tell him.
oh my. But then you asked me to take a look at the book, the original book. And he goes, what do you think? And I go, you want me to tell you the truth? And he goes, yeah, tell me the truth. I go, I wouldn't give this to leaders, but it's great for pastors and theology. And he goes, oh, well then great. Why don't you help me do it? And I shouldn't have said anything, right? Because that got me in trouble.
Well,
But I think it was a blast to be able to see how it came together, where I just looked through the lens of, hey, from a leadership perspective, these are the 6 things you need to know about values, and these are the 6 things you have to practice out. And then when you weaved in the biblical models of how all that plays out, I was really pleased. I was very impressed. Now I love the book. I would give that to anybody now.
And so what's cool about the partnership, and Jeff and I have just had this honest relationship. Like when you're working together in at least in our orbit, you don't blow smoke up someone's skirt. You tell them the truth, because I would rather get it right than think I'm right.
Yeah.
And so the product came out as a book that it has a theological foundation, but is also practical in application. So, and this is what we've been telling everybody. It seems to really be resonating. So what I'll say to you in this launch, this is a book that a pastor could use as a discipleship mechanism with his very best business leaders. And you're going to find the leadership voice of Jeff is going to draw in business leaders, but the pastoral side is going to allow you as a pastor to actually disciple these guys to be better followers of Jesus. So at the end of the day, this book will help pastors be better business leaders, and business leaders be better pastors. So Chad, I just want to thank you for offering an extraordinary 40% off. This is a book I would buy 10 at a time, because that's about the size of a group that you could disciple in your local church.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's helpful too is just to think practically how this is used. We already have a question from Gabe Cooper, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it. Gabe said, what's a good recommendation for how to do this with a team? 1 chapter per session or a cluster of chapters? And then we'll keep on going with some of the story behind the book.
Hey, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I love the question, Gabe, because I think taking a chapter at a time and really chewing it and talking through it and doing the exercises at the back would be a great way to go through it in a 12-week period of time. Because for small groups, for churches, for leadership teams, I think 12 is a really good number that you can really get a handle on and go through each of those. So that's how I think I would do it if I were you.
Yeah, and it's going to take you, it won't take you a week to read the chapter. It'll take you 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It will take you a week at least to do the exercises. And Gabe, if I were you and discipling a group of guys, I would keep like a spreadsheet on each of the guys, because some of them are going to, chapter 3, man, they got it down pat, but chapter 7 is going to be a challenge. And I would just spreadsheet for where they are, what exercises they've done, and track their progress through it, so that, and this is the beauty of leadership, isn't it? That if we have a group of 10 people going through this together, somebody's going to be a master at each of the characteristics and traits, and others are going to learn from them. So this is really, it's not like, I would if you and I were going through this together, there would be pieces that I would go, okay, Jeff, this is something you need to know. And then Jeff would turn it on me and go, well, let me take lead on this for a minute. So it's very much a collegial group discipleship, not a sage on a stage.
All right. So as leaders think about taking their team through this, or just think about themselves, growing, we can all grow as a leader. And I'm sure I'd love to ask this question too later, like how you as leaders grew by writing about leadership, but that's for a different moment. What are the benefits, if you could think about even the top benefits for leaders when they walk away from reading this book? What are they going to take home with them that will change them as leaders?
Gosh, I hope a couple of things, Chad. I hope, one, they hear about the scar tissue, because what we don't talk about in here on the practical side is all the success, but some of the failures, the scar tissue, because I think that's where the best learning is. And hopefully it's not an ideation book where you're like, here's some real, you know, unrealistic pie in the sky kinds of things, but rather they look at it and they go, okay, I've done that. Like when I talk about leadership mindset and having a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset and what that robbed me of as a leader. I hope people can relate to that and they can get a real practical side from this book of, let's just be honest, use it for accountability. And we talk about blind spots and we talk about all those kinds of things in there. And I think it's important for people to feel like they can use this book as a little bit of a way to do a diagnostic of their leadership and a little bit of a way to give them some vision of maybe some things that they can work on and talk to with one another in their groups. So I'm hoping that diagnostic is what they really walk away with and feel like, okay, if this is how Jesus did it, what do I need to do to tighten that up a little bit in my life?
Yeah, so I want to answer the question from my perspective, both what I learned and then what I hope is my big prayer over this book. What I learned specifically from Jeff, because I'm not a team player. I mean, I am a team player, but it doesn't come natural for me. Like when I played soccer, I was the goalie, right? So, and most of what I do in my teaching life or even here at CCV, I'm in a room, I'm digging in, and then I come out, step on stage, and talk. That's not healthy leadership. Now, that's my role, so I want to do it well. But leadership is about teamwork and building teams and bringing the best out of people. So the process of writing this book forced me to be a team player with you, Chad, which, by the way, you did a great job keeping us on task and pushing us forward. And with Jeff, as well as with those that were helping us edit it, it's truly a team product. And maybe that's what I'm most proud about this book. It's not my wisdom or Jeff's wisdom. It's a collective process. What I pray over this book is that there will be men, some of them pastors by vocation, others just pastors in the business world, that will use this as an excuse to make Jesus famous. Because he really was the greatest leader of all time. And when some guys that are like, I'm surrounded with some of the best business leaders in the world right here at our church, and I'm just amazed at what they do. When guys like that or women like that get a sense of, oh, wait a minute, what I'm doing is ministry. Like leading this healthcare team in a major hospital, that is ministry. Building, I've got a guy who's a super good leader. He actually builds dump trucks. He's so good at it. He's working with rough and tumble guys. He's a great leader. He's a Jesus leader. I could just go on in all kinds of businesses and all kinds of areas of business. There are men and women who are learning that what they're doing has a theological base so that their business becomes a calling and their vocation becomes their preoccupation to let Jesus leach in the edges.
Cool. I want to open the book up a little bit and just give people a feel for what the contents are. And then I want to ask you guys a few questions. The main question I want to get to is what's unique about the book. And I know you talked about that a little bit. But for those who are tuning in, you have no idea what this book is. It's called The Master Leader. And there's two parts, the values of a master and the actions of a master. And so it starts and moves centrifugally in that way. So one of the things I really appreciated, Mark, is you were outlining this and we were discussing what's the format of this book. You said, look, there's major leadership principles out there, and there's tons of books on those. But we want to do something a little different. So, for example, the 6 values are integrity, servanthood, stewardship, consistency, caring, and nimbleness. So I'll pause there before we get into part 2. Talk to me a little bit about how we landed on the title nimbleness, because I think that was a debate for about 2 weeks. And then what makes this book unique?
Yeah. Why don't you answer the nimbleness question,
Sure.
and then I'll go to the unique question, because what is most unique is chapter 1 and 2.
Yeah, I will tell you on nimbleness, Chad. For us, we felt like the most important thing a master leader can do is be able to adapt to what's going on in their world. And so rather than talking about here's a perfect way to do strategy, a perfect way to cast vision, how about if we don't fall in love with all those things, but we get excellent at nimbleness because there's disruption constantly in our world. And we're living it today. There's a hurricane coming that's going to hit the southeast coast, in 24 hours. Being nimble, being able to move and not fall in love with what you've created. And I think part of that is a humility that Jesus had in his leadership, that he didn't just say it's this way, but he worked through his parables. He worked through his disciples to show them how to respond to what was going on. There's a storm. Here's what we're going to do in the storm. All those things came. And so I feel like as leaders, if we could understand how to be nimble, it would take down some of the ego, bring in humility, and allow us to be better at adjusting and flexing to what the world needs. And I think that's just an important part. And so I actually think that's one of the most special chapters in the book because it speaks to that very thing.
Well, and in my mind, it's also one of the most Christocentric chapters of the book, if I could use that religious word.
That's a big word.
Yeah,
I like it.
so business leaders, they're great at planning, they're great at structure and systems. Jesus, I don't know that Jesus ever planned a sermon. Maybe he did, but most of it were opportunities that just rose up. A crowd comes, and he responds to the crowd. I know that he didn't plan any of his miracles; that just people just came. His controversies or confrontations, those were not planned. A leader can have all the planning he or she wants, but if they're not nimble in responding to people's needs, and this is a lesson that I actually need to learn, Chad, because I am so systems oriented. I am so disciplined in what I do. When people come in my office, I tell those who work closely with me, hey, if you're going to interrupt me, just know it's probably going to take me 2 full minutes before I even pay attention to you. I'm not going to be nice to you because my mind is product, 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 product. And Jesus' mind was people, 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 people. So the super important chapter. One of the unique things about this as a leadership book, and Jeff and I went around about this. This is one of the areas where I go, no, I can't budge on this. Chapter 1 and chapter 2 are, again, it's not hard to read, but it's deeply theological. I wanted to cover the 2 main titles of Jesus, Son of God and Son of Man. You're not going to read that in most leadership books. Son of God is Jesus' awareness of God as his Father. That's chapter 1. And why it's so important is if you have a father wound that you carry into the business, that father wound may actually drive you to be better at business, but it will not connect you to the people that you're ministering to, whether those are clients or employees. Our identity as leaders is the single most important thing that we have to deal with. And I can tell you that most great leaders I've been around have really struggled with identity. And they know they're successful, and they may know they're significant, but feeling loved and cared for by the Father, being comfortable in their own skin. But why don't you talk about that, Jeff? Because you've been around way more business leaders than I have. Is it true that sometimes the people with the highest salaries have the lowest self-esteem?
100%. And I find it very interesting because I've worked with CEOs who would come out on stage and in town halls and in client meetings. And as you said, they have it all together. And then I'd watch them fold like a cheap tent after the meeting. Jeff, how did I do? You did great. No, did anybody say anything? And I saw this incredible lack of confidence because the confidence wasn't in who they were as a person and in their faith. It was in how did they perceive me? And I've seen that so many times. And so that's why on the practical side of chapter 1, I chose to take self-awareness as part of the integrity and blind spots, because if we don't deal with our own self-deception, do I have what it takes? am I a good enough leader? And we just understand we all have blind spots. Here's what they are. If you know them, they don't become as big of a liability. And so
Mm.
being able to really pull out and look in the mirror at those blind spots will gain your confidence as a leader, because now I don't have to pretend I have it all together. It's so much easier to say,
Yeah.
I really have a lot I need to work on.
I love
It
what
frees you
I
up.
love what you said about it becomes a liability. You can still be successful and insecure, but there will come a crisis point where your insecurity blows up in, say, an affair
Mhm.
or embezzlement or a lawsuit. And so chapter one for me is really, really important. And Chad, I have the set piece I do at men's retreats often where I talk through the life of David, Absalom, Amnon, and Solomon. And you just see the triage when David's father did not recognize him at his anointing. It set a pattern for him. David was one of the best leaders ever. He was a terrible father. And
Hmm.
Absalom felt that. Isn't it interesting that when Absalom attacked David, David told his troops, "Don't you touch him. He's my boy." He loved Absalom. When he was killed, he grieved desperately over Absalom. The only person who didn't know that Absalom loved him or David loved him was Absalom.
Hmm.
And so now the one who should have taken the throne is out, and Solomon comes in. Solomon was actually the fourth son,
Hmm.
actually the fifth son of Bathsheba. The first one died. He was the youngest, like David was. And I wonder how much psychology is involved in that. And now you have Solomon giving all of this wisdom to his son. He wrote a whole book to his son Rehoboam, who screwed up the kingdom and divided the kingdom. Leadership, so that's why I love that term. It becomes a liability during a time of crisis. 276 times in the Bible, God is referred to as Father. Only 3 of those are in the Old Testament. All the rest stem from Jesus himself. So I just think understanding your identity, being comfortable in your own skin, that you are loved by the Father, even if you're not loved by your own father, is a pivotal starting point for all leadership.
Man, um, that gives us a lot to think about. That's really interesting about David as father, and thinking about, because we often think of David like he's almost perfect.
Mhm.
Yeah, there was the Bathsheba thing, and oh yeah, he counted the soldiers at the end, but that's interesting to think about his woundedness and how Jesus fulfills that.
Yeah, let me I just want to look into the camera and talk to the men in the audience. I know there's women watching as well, and we respect and love that you're here, but I don't know women as well as I know men because I am one. If you have a young man who has a father wound that he has not dealt with, it will manifest in one of 3 ways. It will manifest in an inability to control his temper, his inability to control his sex drive, and his consistency of doing things as he said he would do them. You see those inconsistencies play out in the life of Absalom and Amnon, and then in the life of Solomon as well. So these are classic pain points of people who haven't dealt with their father wound.
Well, I wanted to make sure everyone who's watching this or listening to it, that we're giving a 40% off discount on this book. So we're talking about The Master Leader. If you go to himpublications.com/leader and then use the code launch when you go to checkout, 40% off the book. I think it's like $10.19, which is a great deal on this. Makes it easy to buy 10 of them for $100 for your team or whatever it is. Um, so I want to make sure you knew about that. Also, if you
And
are
and
watching this
and
live,
sorry to interrupt, Chad. Christmas is coming. This is
Chris,
like I hate buying Christmas gifts. So when I get something like this, I go, oh, this has value. It will add value and be something that I'm happy to give to someone that will make them better. That's a win for me. Sorry to interrupt.
no, that's great. And if you're watching live, ask us some questions. We want to interact with you through comments here on Facebook. So, did you have something else there, Mark?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, so I got a couple questions for you. One is, and they are not prepared for these. These are fresh questions. What was the most challenging part of pulling this book together?
Since we're honest, Jeff and I have never written together. So I'm not sure he understood the timeline as much. And so I would get something, go, wait, we need 4 times this, or we need this now. And so that's just getting to know people and being honest about, it was probably more on me than him of not being clear at the front, but working together on timelines and schedules is always a challenge.
It's like when,
Is that fair?
Yeah. At first, because when he first asked me, I think it was October, and he says, "Could you have that done by Thanksgiving?" I go, "Sure." Chapter 1. No, you meant all chapters. So we hustled and we got through it. But you know what was great about it, Mark? It was both the blessing and the challenge. It was great to just sit down and share from stories, from experience, from life. What was challenging was the congruency. And I know, Chad, that's what the editing team and you helped us a lot on, is making sure that we stayed congruent, that we had examples that tied, because we didn't literally write together. We said, here's the topic. And I brought in my leadership piece and you brought in your biblical piece. And to watch that congruency come together, at first I was like, how is this going to happen? And it not sound like this was written totally different by different people. And it's amazing how that congruency came together. And I was very pleased in the end. I was listening to the audio book 2 weeks ago. I was on an airplane and I listened to the whole thing and I was like, wow. Because we again did that separately. I recorded in the studio, then you recorded. And I listened to it and I was like, wow, that actually is a great way to hear the indulation of the stories and the voice. It was fun to be able to add that piece together. But I think that was the biggest challenge, was congruency. Can we sound like we're one voice, but yet 2 different perspectives?
Well, yeah, and when I invited you to come in and look at my whiteboard, going back to that story, you said, I had moved this piece around, this piece around. So originally it was 6 chapters. That was part A and part B, and we broke it off into 12 chapters. And then this Yahoo over here saying, well, I would move this piece around, I would move this piece around. Okay, but you understand, I already have an introduction, and like the connective tissue was all gone. So we had to rework that.
Yeah.
But anything, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And that's gonna mean some extra elbow grease.
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I loved it, Mark, when I was like, hey, what do you think about really making this into a new version? You're like, let's nail it. And I really think you guys did,
Thank you.
Just with a servant heart too, thinking broadly. I love y'all's vision at Christ Church of the Valley. It's to win the valley for Christ. I think you phrase it something like that. And this is the kind of tool. There's not a ton of, let's say, Christian books that are an easy way into leadership circles or business discussions. This is the easy button for those kinds of circles. You could have a business association, group, and just invite people. Hey, there's a cool new leader book. Hey, everyone knows Jesus, right? 12 ways to lead like Jesus. But it's palatable and it's practical. People will not regret reading it. So we told you about part 2. We didn't tell you what the chapters were. So let me just tell you what the second part of this book is. So it's called The Actions of a Master Leader. It says build culture, chapter 7. And then 8 is cast vision, develop strategy, focus priorities, take action, and mentor leaders. So I love it. Moves from values to actions. That is who we need to be, translates into what we do. And that order is really important. So it takes you on that journey in the book. And I just want to mention one other feature, and then I got a question for you guys. As you look inside, at the end of, I think it's probably 5 or 6 key chapters, there's exercises. At the end of every chapter, there's something to do practically, which I love, but there's actually specific exercises. There's one that takes like a whole day with your team. I think that one's about vision, but then there's personal kind of exercises, taking an audit of your leadership, and all of it's available for free. So think of it like this, as a leadership training course for the price of a book.
Yeah, no, that's
And
right. That's right.
so there's a whole video series that's free, open access, instantly available. That's the information for that's in here. And then you can go and download all this stuff, print off the PDFs, work. I mean, it really is a treasure trove of leadership material. So,
Yeah, and
um,
Chad, I want
yeah.
to. I know you have a question on the horizon, but I think people will be interested to know this. Everything we do at Christ Church of the Valley is open-handed. So Jeff and I have signed the royalties over to the church. So he and I are not getting a dime from this book. And we don't want to. We want there to be no barrier or any question about motives. Our goal is to reach the entire valley for Jesus Christ. I can't do that by preaching from a stage. Jeff can't do that in the business world. We need every great church in the greater Phoenix area to be great at leadership. They probably have, every church has great leaders in it. Not all churches are led well. And so if this could be a tool to help the business leaders in a church, maybe it's not the pastor discipling the business leader, but the business leader saying, hey, pastor, why don't you come in and we're going to talk through some of these principles so that our businesses get better and your businesses get better. At the same time, we can't reach the whole valley even with every church being led well. It's going to be when every business led by a Christian becomes a ministry. And so I'm just begging with leaders out there, whether you're in Phoenix or wherever you are in the world, use your organization that you lead or the piece of it that you lead as a way to let Jesus, even if you never use his name, his principles will open up opportunities for you to lead people to the master leader.
Love that.
Okay. Yeah. Jeff, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I love that. That's
Okay.
that's right on the money. And I think if we can help business leaders in the church say more than just, hey, we're praying for you, but we're actually want to help you be a more effective leader, that's the stewardship and the shepherding that those folks need in our church. And so this is one way that we can help equip them to do that for sure.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times when we think about discipleship in terms of within a home group or a house church or the four walls of a church, but really we need to make disciples in our marketplace context or in our nonprofit or, serving in wherever we're leading or being led. We need to do it like Jesus. And so I think thinking in terms of discipling people in their vocation, not just to become ministers, is huge, and they champion that in this book. Okay.
Yeah, I gotta tell a quick story here
Okay.
because not today, but I have in the past led these hiking trips to Israel. And I was at an event just before we get like we're a week away from leaving, and one of the guys going on the trip was killed in an auto accident. So I'm at this event, and a guy comes up to me, pretty cool dude, like he was a high level business leader, and he goes, "Someone told me I should," like invited them onto this closed network hike. And I looked at him and I'm going, really? Yeah, I think you should go. In fact, maybe God opened up a way for you to go because this guy's untimely death. So he's like, I'm guilt manipulating him. He goes on the trip. And on the first segment of the hike, Stephen comes up to me and I don't know, like we got 10 miles to hike that day. So we had a long conversation. And he goes, I hate people in church. I said, why? Well, they're hypocrites. And he goes, yeah, I hate hypocrites in the church too. And he's like, whoa. And then I said, and I am one. Imagine that. So for the next 10 miles, he laid every objection that he had about the church. And I just loved him through it. And we walked together, and he was so much fun. Something happened to him at Cana of Galilee, and his life was changed. We just asked the guys to go pray over one another, and I went and prayed over him. And when I got done, this is a rough and tumble dude with a backpack on. He's just crying, and he goes, no one has ever prayed for me before. Wow. So we walk on from there to Capernaum, and I see him at Capernaum, and something is happening to him. But it's his business. So then we go down to Jerusalem. Dude gets a tattoo, gorgeous tattoo right on his calf. And under it, he put a date that was 2 days earlier. And I said, like, I love your tattoo, but I don't get the date. Because that's when I met Jesus. It was at Capernaum. He came back and blasted out on social media what had happened to him and said, anybody who wants to know about what's happened to me, I'm going to just invite you to ask me. This is a guy that was known for partying, and now he's known for promoting Jesus. He's still got a ways to go, but there's an example of just walking with guys on the path that they're taking and challenging them to step up as leaders and lead like Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, it works.
Mark, thanks for sharing that story. So if you want to change someone's life outside of the church, either go to Israel at a later date, or just read this book with them.
That's it. Same.
Or get a tattoo. Any of those.
No, but that's great. Okay, here's a question for you. What are you most excited to see in people in your church, business leaders, anyone in leadership in your church, but more broadly, what do you want to see over the coming days and years as a result of this book?
I want to see leaders get comfortable talking about Jesus because they start by talking in something they're comfortable with. Part of what keeps great leaders in business from being great leaders of their home or in the church is they just feel ill-equipped to have a spiritual conversation. This is center lane for you as a leader. You know this already. You just didn't know it goes back to Jesus. If you can connect the two, it will, I hope, unleash the floodgates of conversations, not with other Christians, but primarily with other business leaders who want to be better leaders. And if you could show them Jesus through their own vocabulary and lane in leadership, that's a huge win for me.
I love that, Mark. And I would love to watch the two worlds converge. I feel like, here at CCV, we have so many business leaders as a part of our church, and about 60% of our staff come from the business world. They don't come from Bible college. But watching them be able to converge these two worlds of our faith and our leadership, I just feel like there's so many people who are so good at leading in the office and so poor at leading themselves and at home, their families. And if they could just see that these principles are the same ones, Jesus had amazing ability to cast vision. He had an amazing ability to see how he created strategy, the path that we're going to take. He was really, really good at mentoring. He was really good at these things. And I feel like if we can help people understand that these two worlds are not my faith world and my business world, these are one world, and bring it together, you're going to see why they can be successful in both lanes.
I know Chad's supposed to be asking the questions here, but this is if you watch the videos, and we're going to start posting the videos that Jeff and I did chapter by chapter. You'll see them show up on social media. I know they're already online at Hymn Publications, but this is the way our whole video thing went. I have a question for you, Jeff. You, because of your role here at CCV, you are asked to go and kind of consult with other churches. And it's not that we're perfect. We're far from perfect. But we've got some scar tissue. We've got some road miles underneath us. What do you see as you look through the master leader, the 6 characteristics and the 6 actions? What do you see that most church leaders would grow from quickest and most right away?
Honestly, I think it's an easy answer. I didn't know you were going to ask this question, but I would say unequivocally, I believe it's creating culture. I believe in the church, we are so busy being about the business of church and doing the execution of church, we lose sight of where we put culture in the hierarchy. And I believe we put talent over culture, and we need a reversal.
Talk about that. If I'm hearing you right, you're saying when you hire or when you fire, culture should be the primary issue.
100%. Culture should be the reason, because what we tend to do is we say, we look at them together. Let's look at talent and culture. We all know culture matters. We hear the term culture eats strategy for breakfast, but we put them at the same place. And if I'm looking to hire you, Mark, and I think talent-wise, you're a 10, but culture-wise, you're a 5. I go, on average, he's a 7. That works. No, it doesn't work. It should be a phase gate where if they don't pass the culture test, we don't even care about how talented they are, because we know in the end of the day, that is going to bring down our church faster than anything. Our teams will not be successful if we don't have the right culture. So getting it right.
Do you think businesses have a better handle on that than churches?
No, I think they have the exact same problem. What surprises me is when I left the business world and culture was such a focus there, and I came to the church world, I realized it's the same challenge, just slightly different in where the issues are. Speaking straight, one of our important cultures, it's tough to do in the church. We can be so grace-based, we don't speak straight and say what needs to be said.
No.
And so I feel like if we could take one thing that right away I know would apply so well to everybody's business, nonprofit, or church, is creating culture, doing it well, and laying that out in a way that I think is going to be incredibly successful.
Yeah, and for me, the number 2 is focus.
Yeah.
Because we get churches come from all over the country, and they walk our campus, and I get the privilege of kind of being a host to many of those churches that I've worked with around the country. They come here and they go like, "What do you do?" We don't do a lot. We really only have 4 ministries: weekend service, students and kids, stars, which is our sports ministry, and our groups. We don't try to do a ton of things because we only want to do what we can do at our very maximum best. And the focus that gets spread out like a shotgun often never hits the target of the community.
And I think every business leader needs that exact same focus.
Right.
Most CEOs and executives and leaders, they are entrepreneurial. So they haven't come across an idea they don't love. And that is a challenge, because when we narrow our focus, we broaden our impact. And so many leaders are just bombarded with opportunities and what ends up being distractions. And if they can learn this focus muscle, it will serve them really well in their business or their church.
Yeah. Okay. So for all of you watching online, excuse me for a minute. I want to have a conversation with Jeff, just the 2 of us. I've actually been meditating on this, and I've wanted to throw it by you, so I'm going to do it right in front of the world right now. It feels to me like the reason, and I know churches, I don't know business as well, feels to me like when churches shotgun, and I'm going to have a ministry for this and a ministry for that, it's because we say yes to insiders without realizing we're saying no to outsiders. Outsiders are not attracted by our smorgasbord of ministries. It's insiders that feel more fueled and filled for their pet project. Would you say that's
100%? 100%. And that is why we have to get good at the N word. How do I say N-O? Because when I say no, I'm not really saying no to this. I'm saying yes to what matters.
And when I say yes to this, I'm saying no.
Exactly. And I think we just got to get better at that. We don't love doing that. We don't love turning anything down because we think we can make everything work. And it is so important that we realize what matters isn't the people already in the flock, in the church. It's the people exploring the church. It's why, for example, as our church, as you know, Mark, we take an approach that we're not going to be divisive with social media on things like politics. Do we care about politics? Of course, every person does. But what if somebody's seeking Jesus and they look online and they see us posting about red this or blue that? They're going to go, ooh, that church must not agree with me. And they'll keep going. And so we don't put down and put away the things that we think we have a right to so that someone else could hear the message of Jesus.
Well, and I can tell you why that's so hard for me. Most people who go into social work or education or ministry have this heart for people, which is right? I mean, it's what we should. But when you are focused on individuals, it's difficult to focus on the organization. And so we wind up catering to either the complaints, needs, or tears of individuals. And Jesus did a lot of that, but without losing focus on the bigger picture of the kingdom of God. So, all right, our discussion is over. We can go back online.
I appreciate that. Jeff, I really liked when you said when you narrow your focus, you broaden your impact. I think I'm going to meditate on that for a little while. And Ron Dickens agreed. He said, Jeff, I couldn't agree more. So way to go. All right, we've got a question from another Ron Lawrence. And this one's probably more for Mark. We read the original book in our preachers group, Ron said. Would the second edition be different enough to not be repetitive?
110%. I want to apologize for the first book that you bought or were given probably. It wasn't bad, but notice what he said. It was in our preachers group. It was a great book for preachers. But if you're actually wanting to reach non-theological business leaders, I think this is far and away a better option. And Ron, the reason it is, what you will miss in this one is some of the lengthy scripture references or the deep dive in exegesis. That's my lane. I love it. But what Jeff told me is, yeah, my guys wouldn't read it. And it was like pouring a bucket of ice cubes on my head. What do you mean they wouldn't read it? I wrote it, of course. No, my guys won't read it because they need something that they can actionably implement immediately. So Ron, if you want a book that would take you through practical exercises with guys that don't have a Bible college degree, this is a better option.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about how to use this. Give us a couple scenarios. Mark, I know you just talked about business leaders, but give us a scenario for a church leader. And then Jeff, if you want to give a scenario for something in the marketplace, okay, and let's say a small to medium-sized team. I think the bigger sized team, it's like, okay, you can get creative, but focus on those audiences.
Yeah. So let's say you have 3 or 4 staff members. You're a pastor. You have 3 or 4 staff members. Here's one very creative option. I would grab about 5 or 6 business leaders in your church and go through it with them, and then have them take each of your employees through this together, so that it's not the pastor telling his staff how to lead better. It's actually business leaders who have been discipled by the pastor. So they get the Jesus side and the spirituality side, and then they become pastors of your staff. That's one scenario I could see working. Another scenario is, especially for those who are larger givers in your church, we try to give them, a thank you of some kind. This is an easy onboard of a thank you. You know what? You know what the big givers want from a pastor more than anything else? Is time. Because this is kind of an interesting idea. Pastors all the time have people say, give me, give me, give me. They want your time. They want your attention. Who pastors the pastor? CEOs don't get pastored. And it's not just that they want the pastor's time so that they can go, look, I'm in the inner circle. It's they need a pastor so that they can be a pastor of their group. So I could see this in a couple of different ways being used to disciple your best business leaders and then let them disciple your employees.
I like that. I think another thing you could do in the marketplace, Chad, is you could take the structure of the book, the 12 areas, and I would love to challenge leaders in the marketplace to just take those words and give yourself a letter grade. How am I doing at servanthood? How am I doing at stewardship? How am I doing at nimbleness? And then after you've given yourself an honest assessment, now if you have a small team, you can do your own 360 and say, hey guys, I've been working on these areas. They don't even have to read the book. They don't have to know what it means. Just answer how I'm doing in these 12 areas and give me a letter grade, because I would love to know how well I'm serving you or how nimble I'm. Do you see me as someone who falls in love with my plans and never comes off of them, never changes, even if the market has told us they don't love that product or they don't love our approach, and just use it as a tool, as an assessment tool that others can give you feedback. And it could be a really good way to just simply, it wouldn't be over spiritual. It would just be a great way to say, how well do you think I'm doing in this? Am I casting vivid, clear vision? Am I creating a strategy that is a clear path? Am I doing those things well? And if they did that, they had their own assessment and then they had a report card from 3 or 4 of the people that worked for them. I think it'd be incredibly valuable as a leader. And then they go on a journey to start to read the book and break it apart. But I think it could be a great start for them.
Mhm. Let me ask you about this, because I've had like American Express and a couple of large companies that have a voluntary group
Mhm.
for Christians.
Mhm.
So within those kind of groups, is this something that in a major corporation, a hospital system, or an insurance division, that a leader could have a volunteer opt-in kind of discipleship growth track?
Absolutely. Those networking groups, as they often
Hmm.
call them in the
Hmm.
marketplace, those are great places for able to do this. And it's not as direct as, say, a Bible study, because it's a leadership book with biblical
Hmm.
principles. But as we said, God created leadership. So I think it's a great way for those people in the marketplace to say, let's get together at 7:30 for our breakfast meeting. Let's go over leadership principles.
Mm.
I think it could be a fabulous way to do that.
All right, so I've got one more kind of written question. Before I do that, I just want to remind everyone listening, this is a special 40% off. If you can hear my voice, at least for the next few days, you can get 40% off at himpublications.com/leader, and then use the coupon launch. Or you can just go to Amazon, either way. So, okay, here's my last question, and you guys can camp on this however long you want. A lot of churches are thinking a lot about discipleship. And it's kind of interesting that a lot of times it's like we think of discipleship in spiritual terms. Well, that's the spiritual disciplines, or like, reading the Bible and prayer. But your last chapter is called mentorship. And I appreciated that you used some contextual, or it's called mentor leaders. Use some, marketplace terminology, but really it's about discipleship. So if you can connect the impetus of this book with the terminology of leadership and that mindset, I think that'd be a great way to end this.
Hmm.
Sure. Yeah. You want me to start?
Yeah, you start.
This is a very passionate chapter for me because I believe there is no success without a successor, simply put. And so the discipleship is not, the mentorship and discipleship to me is not, oh, it's a nice thing to do. It's an obligation. My life verse happens to be Luke 12:48. He was given much, much is required. He who is responsible for much, even more is required. And I feel like that is a command that for us, if we don't multiply, if we don't find a way, because we will end, our leadership journey will end. We will sell our business, we will exit our role. And then what happens? There is nothing left if we didn't take the time to pour into and create a legacy on those who are going to follow us. And so I honestly believe, I mentioned an example in the book where I talk about in college, I ran the 400-meter relay. And in that relay race, it is won and lost in the handoff. And I believe it is true in leadership. And I believe it is true in the church as well as we disciple others. There's going to be a time where, just like Jesus, we're going to leave, and there's going to be left a great command, a great commission for us to continue after we're gone. And it's so important for us to make sure that the race is won and lost in the handoff. And so we must think about who we're mentoring. Who is our Timothy? Who is our Barnabas? Who is pouring into us, and who are we pouring into? That isn't a nice to have, that is a must. And for many of you out there, whatever you're leading, you know that leadership will come to an end, but it doesn't have to. It can carry on if you're pouring into others around you. And I think it is absolutely a critical thing for us to all do.
That's good. Yeah, so to close out, I want to speak to the pastor and to the business leader, since that's what this book is really designed to do. To the pastor, I would say, that discipleship has traditionally been about a Bible study. You get in a room, you open up a text, or you read a book, and you go through the chapters, and you are kind of the sage that's helping these young whippersnappers know the Bible. Cognitive discipleship is relatively worthless because the people who knew the Bible the most were actually the ones that killed Jesus. We all know that. When Jesus called his disciples, yes, at first, he said, come and see. So they had to go where Jesus was and just watch what he's doing. But then he said, I want you to listen and say. So they listened to what Jesus preached, and then he sent them out to preach. That's just level 2 discipleship. Level 3 discipleship is not when you use your ears or your mouth or your eyes or your feet. It's when you use your hands. You go build something that God has called you to build. So discipleship, I would much rather use the term, not even mentorship, but coaching. Because both discipleship and mentorship kind of, they're good words, but the way we use them often is for, I need to know something more instead of do something better. So that's my message to the pastors, to you business leaders out there. God designed you actually to replicate yourself. He designed us to do that as parenting. We have children and they're little mini me's. Your greatest satisfaction in life, please hear me say this, is not going to be when someone above you recognizes you, is when someone below you recognizes you. And the way God designed your brain with the release of oxytocin and serotonin, those happy chemicals, is when you do something small for someone else, they recognize your value in their life. Your ability to be recognized from people hierarchy above you is thin and temporary. But when you pour into people below you, it is thick, easy, and permanent. The recognition you get. I've discipled guys for over 30 years, and they are some of the greatest pastors around the country. To be honest, they're way better than I am. They're better communicators, they're better leaders, they're more adept, they're more well-read, but they still look up to me as a mentor because in that season of the life where their hockey stick growth curve was highest, I was present. And some of you don't believe in yourself enough to actually do that kind of mentoring. And I'm going to give you the secret of all my mentoring for 30 years. This is embarrassing to admit. I have almost nothing to offer young men. I have almost nothing to offer young women. They can get the same wisdom from somewhere else, the same tips and tricks from somewhere else. You know what they can't get? And they can get it from you, and they can get it from me. What I have given to the men and women that I've discipled that's more valuable than anything else is a view through the windshield rather than the rearview mirror. And if you can help someone coming up through the ranks see themselves 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road, when you are old and irrelevant, which is coming sooner than you think, you will never be irrelevant to someone that you made relevant.
Mark, thanks for that. And Jeff, man, this is good. I want to go back and read the book.
Do the
We've read
audible
it,
version.
we've read it a lot of times. Well, guys, thank you so much. And everyone watching, I just want to encourage you that this is just a tool in your tool belt, another arrow in your discipleship quiver. And maybe the next step in your journey as a leader. It's fresh. One of my favorite things is we had I think Jeff, you know, the CEO of Ping. So the president and CEO of Ping Golf endorsed this along with Matt Chandler and some other high level leaders. This is going to be a powerful tool, and you get to be a part of it. When you read it, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's in scripture. But being able to marry that with practice is going to be really valuable and helpful. So again, thanks, Mark and Jeff. Any final words here tonight?
Well, I would just ask you, if you do read it and if you do find it valuable, do us a favor. And this is what helps get the word out. Go to Amazon and write a review of it and tell us what you think. Talk straight to us. If there's something we can do better on the next round, please tell us. If it's something that's helped you, give us a good review on Amazon.
And just remember, leadership is a journey. Just get on the journey. And we just encourage you. I hope this is a blessing to you, but we do encourage you to not quit because Jesus has given us an assignment. And wherever you are, you have an assignment that he's put you in. Lead well wherever you are. We'll see you on the road.
Preach that, bro.
Hey, lead that, bro. Thanks, Chad.
All right,
Yeah, thanks for
guys.
setting this up. Peace.
Yep. All right. See you guys. Bye.